Happy holidays, everyone, and welcome to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. This is Stacy Royster, executive producer. I am delighted to serve as your guest host today, as our fabulous host, Attorney Ethel Mitchell, is on a much-needed vacation. Welcome to all who are listening live throughout the world on Radio 1 station 1450 AM, WOLDC.com, LawTalkWithEthelMitchell.com, and over the free TuneIn app. We have a great program for you today. Our guest is Attorney Barbara Arnwine, President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I must also disclose that she is my full-time boss, as they say on the Steve Harvey television show, Boss Lady. So that's Boss Lady number 1, and I'm filling in for Boss Lady number 2. We'll be discussing the national epidemic of police brutality and misconduct, necessary reforms, and what you can do. So listen, learn, and participate. This program is brought to you by Ethel Mitchell's talented law office, Wills and Trusts, LLC, where she prepares wills, trusts, power of attorneys, and advanced medical directives. If you or someone you know needs a will, a trust, or assistance administering an estate, call Attorney Mitchell at 202-772-1988. That's 202-772-1988. Law Talk is also brought to you by Equity Resources of 10 G Street, Northeast D.C. If you want to sell your home, Equity Resources will buy your home quickly and for cash. If you have a home to sell or any property in the metropolitan area, call Equity Resources at 202-621-6632. As Ethel reminds us, law is powerful, and it can hurt you or help you. It impacts everything you do. What you don't know can hurt you, and what you do know can empower you. So each week, Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell aims to empower you by bringing you professionals who know the law to enlighten you and empower you. All of our programs are archived on LawTalkWithEthelMitchell.com, so if you missed a program, go there. And all the programs are posted by our webmaster, Errol Hooks, within 72 hours of their airing. We want you to be part of the conversation. We want to hear your comments or questions, so call us at 1-800-450-7876. That's 1-800-450-7876, or tweet us at LawTalkEM. First, I must remind you that everything you hear on this show is for information purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is established by anything said on the show. Each person's circumstances are different. You must seek individual counsel for any situation for which you need legal advice. So let's get started. We are dealing with a national epidemic of police brutality and misconduct, largely affecting minority communities, especially our black men, women, and youth. Today's expert, Attorney Barbara Arnwine, is uniquely qualified to discuss this national crisis of race and policing and solutions. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about her. She is President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law since 1989. She is internationally renowned for contributions on critical justice issues, including the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1991 and the 2006 reauthorization of provisions of the Voting Rights Act. She also created the legendary Voting Rights Map of Shame in 2001, which remains popular. She is a graduate of Scripps College and Duke University School of Law. She continues to champion civil rights and racial justice issues nationally and internationally. Ms. Arnwine's work includes women's rights, immigrant rights, judicial diversity, criminal justice reform, racial profiling, healthcare disparities, and much, much more. Employment discrimination, voting rights, community development, and housing, and more. She is a well-known leader of election protection, and she has received numerous regional and local and national awards. And she's just, again, a legend of our time, an iconic civil rights leader. And all that know her certainly are blessed to hear and receive all of her gifts and talents. Ms. Arnwine is also the Board Vice Chair of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty and serves on the Board of Directors of Moms Rising and Independent Sector. She is an honorary board member of Welcome U.S. and is also a member of the American Bar Association section of Individual Rights and Responsibilities. Ms. Arnwine is a member of the National Bar Association. Welcome, Attorney Barbara Arnwine, to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell.
Well, thank you, Stacy. Good morning.
Good morning. And thank you for sharing your Saturday afternoon with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here.
Yes. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is indeed a national crisis. And I know the Lawyers Committee has been at the forefront of fighting for racial justice and equality for over 51 years. This is a huge modern-day civil rights issue of police brutality and misconduct. Of course, there's no accurate or comprehensive figure for the rate of homicides by police in the U.S., but help our listeners to understand just the scope of this nationwide problem.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad that you're taking up this subject because people have been listening to it and they haven't been quite clear about what is going on. This is, in fact, everyone, a national crisis because what we have going on throughout the country is an epidemic of police killings of African Americans. Let me be very clear. In a lot of the commentary, people are focusing on African American men. But I want to be clear that it is a crisis for African American people, as black women are also being killed. And when I say black women, I mean girls and women, just like we're looking at boys and men being killed. And if we don't have the right analysis of the problem, we won't solve the right problem. So I really want to point out that, a lot of this stems from the history of policing in our country and the fact that, policing in the United States was largely developed to keep what was seen as the African slave population under control. That policing evolved over the decades, especially during the Jim Crow era, that has been documented in the great book called Slavery by Another Name, that deals with how policing was once again used to re-enslave and cripple the African American population after, quote, emancipation, and how the brutality of policing was used up until the 1940s to really contain and restrict African American economic progress. It's a great book. Everyone should read it. We also know that following the Civil Rights Movement, during the Civil Rights Movement, policing forces were, very, very active and very obstructive and very dangerous. And we know that during the 1960s Civil Rights Movement, that, police forces were very repressive for the Civil Rights Movement itself. And you saw during that time, especially in the late 60s, the Black Panther Party creation. You saw, all kinds of whispers of COINTELPRO and all other kinds of problems of law enforcement. And then in the 1980s and 90s, you saw the entire war on crime, which was used to basically come up with a whole set of new criminal procedures and measures that also impacted the African American community disproportionately, and to this day continues to displace and wound African Americans and our economic viability in this society critically. It is no accident that in 2014 we are in a crisis that we see. I am very, very glad that the young people in our society have decided enough is enough, and they're not going to put up with it anymore. And I'm glad that they've taken to the streets, because this crisis and epidemic has been with us for years and for decades, for centuries. And it's time for us to take it on.
Thank you, Barbara. And, and just in terms of the rate of homicides by police in the United States, I've been seeing different figures. There was a Washington Post article that stated the FBI's database is limited and uses self-reported and conservative estimates. So it's difficult to accurately display the numbers. And so I've been seeing some things that say a white police officer killed a black person nearly 2 times a week during a 7-year period in 2012. And then I've been seeing this viral statistic that's been widely disputed. A black person is killed every 28 hours. Do you have any insight on that?
Yes. In about 3 years ago, the best study we saw was a compilation that was done of black deaths by unarmed people after the killing of Trayvon Martin. Mm-hmm. There was a great study done that year that looked at black deaths and compiled every black death that was done at the hand of either law enforcement or a quasi-law enforcement entity. And when I say that, I mean, people like the Community Watch, which is what George Zimmerman was part of, that killed Trayvon Martin, or by, quote, security forces or, private forces, whatever. And what we found in that particular study was that in that 1 year, 120 unarmed African Americans were shot. 120. So that was, probably the best one that we've seen. It is tragic that Congress has not taken any steps, or no other administration has taken any steps to make sure that there's an accurate database of police killings. There is no such thing. The voluntary reporting means that, a great percentage of police forces in this country, of which there are over, 16,000, are not reporting their actual shootings. So we don't know how many people are being shot and killed. We don't know the ages. We don't know the race. We don't know the gender. But what's good is that people are tracking themselves, and that's helped us from being able to pull data from community reporting. But we need better federal data, and I'm hoping that by the end of this coming year, 2015, that we will finally start seeing that data as part of the new, Police Death and Police Custody Act. Mm-hmm. But we also know that a lot of these killings happen before people are, quote, in custody.
Absolutely. And Barbara, a huge problem in all of this is, of course, militarized police forces. Whoa. And that's a big issue. I know that the Lawyers Committee and other civil rights groups and leaders have been paying attention to. So, tell us what's going on there in terms of, what else we're dealing with nationally, racial profiling and stop and frisk and the disproportionate arrests. And just give us a scope of those kinds of issues in addition to our black people being killed in the streets by police officers.
Well, they're all related, and that's the tragedy, is that, over the last number of years, the Department of Justice, of course, funds a lot of the police departments, and unfortunately, these police departments have not been held accountable for their racial profiling in policing, which has been a huge problem. And that when I say racial profiling, folks, I'm talking about police departments that actively pursue African American suspects or African Americans, at a rate disproportionate to their numbers in the general population. It's also what we call targeted policing, such as in Washington, D.C., where you see arrests totally disproportionate to the numbers of blacks for things like marijuana, when we know that whites use marijuana at a much greater rate in this city. So it's those kinds of issues that have been going on for years, not to mention the coke, the coke powder, cocaine disparities, powder crack, cocaine disparities. But what's been also, really problematic in all of this has been the provisions by the Department of Defense, excess, quote, military equipment to police departments. We've known for at least the last 10 years that police departments have been out of control with the rise of what we call SWAT teams, and that their SWAT team use has been really disproportionate. They've been, using riot gear, looking more militarized than in, the actual Afghanistan or Iraq, that we've actually seen these SWAT teams just take off.
Absolutely crazy. Barbara,
Right.
we need to take a quick break, and we're going to pick back up on this as soon as we come back.
1450 WOL, where information is power.
Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell is sponsored by Equity Resource, a development, construction, and investment firm that is transforming properties throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Our mission is to develop properties at a high level of value, a low risk of investment, while providing impeccable service to our customers. When you're ready to sell, renovate, or invest in a property, choose Equity Resource. Call us today at 202-621-6632 or visit our website, equityresource.net.
It's the end of year clearance sale at Lumber Liquidators. We'd rather sell it than count it. So every floor in every store is on sale, and it all must go. Get deals on first quality flooring for less than half of what you'd pay at other stores. Choose from over 300 styles of pre-finished hardwood, over 70 styles of bamboo, and over 80 styles of laminate from just 35 cents. And save even more on liquidation closeouts. If it's in stock, it's on sale. And pay no interest until January 2017. Don't miss these end of year deals on over 400 floors. Visit lumberliquidators.com to find a store near you.
Who might you save?
Your mother, your father, your husband, uncle, aunt, son.
Learn fast, F-A-S-T, the sudden signs of a stroke, and you could save
Your friend, your best friend, teacher, boss, coach.
F, face drooping, A, arm weakness, S, speech difficulty, T, time to call 911. F-A-S-T, face, arm, speech, time. That's F, face drooping, A, arm weakness, S, speech difficulty, T, time to call 911. The sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in the recovery of
Your neighbor, the waiter, a fellow shopper, a total stranger, grandmother, grandfather.
So learn FAST, the sudden signs of a stroke, then pass it on, because you never know who might save you.
Your wife, your colleague, teammate, mother.
Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
I can make an impact in the world. As young people think that we can't make a difference, but not only we can make a difference, but sometimes we can make the biggest difference.
We wanted to be the doers and we wanted to be the changers.
You just have to find something that you're passionate about and use your talents and your abilities to volunteer.
Volunteering doesn't have to be a chore.
It really is a reward in itself.
It helps you get farther in life.
There is no better feeling than helping somebody else.
You could see one person smile, you could tell they needed that smile, and it could really change and open up your heart to new things.
A lot of things are really competitive about individual achievement. Volunteering is a way to take a step back from that.
See a need, gather friends, and change the world. Changing someone's world. It happens now. This is the time. And this is when you learn, so why not start?
Are you a young volunteer making a difference? Apply for the Prudential Spirit of Community Award. Visit spirit.prudential.com.
Welcome back to the Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, tail-wagging, backyard-hanging, and, of course, companionship.
And what breed would you say Satchmo is?
I'd have to go with maybe a lavish terrier-hound chihuahua-looking kind of mix.
Tremendous dog.
I'd also like to point out Satchmo's coloring, a white, gray, brown, black brindle, simply marvelous.
You know, it's such a treat to watch a dog like this.
Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive. And now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance, so common with this group.
And finally, the loving face lick.
It's great how he just gets in there and, well, licks.
Fantastic. But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
News Talk 1450 WOL-AM, where information is power.
Welcome back to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. This is today's guest host, Stacey Royster. We're speaking with attorney Barbara Arnwine, President and Executive Director of the National Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We're speaking about police brutality and misconduct, necessary reforms, and what you can do. So if you have questions or comments, call us at 1-800-450-7876. That's 1-800-450-7876. Barbara, right before the break, we were talking about militarized police forces and the use of SWAT teams. So pick back up on your point there.
Yes. Well, I was just describing that the tragedy is that once you give people military equipment and they don't have military training, think about all the training that people go through to be, actual officers, actual combat troops in the United States. You don't just, show up and get a week of training or so and then you're on the battlefield. No, you get training constantly. And you go to boot camp, you have a pass, you got all this criteria. But instead, we give this military-grade equipment to police forces for officers who have no training to be military personnel. And we know that from studies that have been done of SWAT teams, that over 80% of all of SWAT deployment is for serving search warrants. And that all of this, heavy military equipment is deployed for that purpose, not for, taking down terrorists or, encountering other people. So it's natural that if you give people materials, all this sophisticated military equipment, that they're going to want to use it.
Absolutely.
They're going to want to put their Humvee on the road. They're going to want to, try their militarized tanks. They're going to want to see what their night vision goggles do. All of this nonsense. And, some people know my own family was the victim of one of these, assaults. So I know firsthand what it looks like. But also I just want people in the D.C. area to realize that Maryland, the state of Maryland, was recognized as having one of the highest use of unjustified deployments of SWAT teams in the country.
My goodness.
So we're sitting in the heart of this problem. And I think it's very, very important for people to realize that what you saw in Ferguson is not just a Ferguson reality, that any community could become Ferguson overnight because there's that much military surplus equipment out there being used by untrained people.
My goodness. And speaking of Ferguson, some people say that's where it all started. We know that there were many youth killed way before Ferguson and before Michael Brown's killing. And to that point, the Lawyers Committee under your leadership has convened other national civil and human rights groups to address this issue nationwide. So tell us a bit about your efforts and how we all can help.
Well, I want everyone to know that the Civil Rights Coalition, Ferguson, and police reform was started right after the killing of Michael Brown. I had the misfortune being ill when Michael Brown was killed, and however, God knows how to put you down sometimes to, make you concentrate on something important. And so I was able to actually track what was going on in Ferguson very quickly. And within 3 days of the killing of Michael Brown, I was able to, with my really incredible public policy director, Tanya Clay House, to pull together a coalition conference call of most of the major civil rights organizations in the country. And what we did was we talked about what had happened and what could go on, what could be done. And as we talked about it, we realized there was no one single answer, that it was, dealing with all these consequences, decades of, mispolicing, decades of, the war on crime results, decades of, just unregulated killings of African Americans, and that the only way we could approach it was by coming up with a comprehensive list of reforms. So we developed what is known as a unified statement of action to promote reform and stop police abuse. Anybody who really, really cares about this issue, you must read the unified statement, because it's not only brilliant in its setting forth of the problem, but it also has 14 recommendations that are critical for addressing this problem. And if you look at the 14 recommendations, they really are comprehensive. They deal with what can be done at the city level, what can be done at the state level, and what can be done at the federal level to address these problems. It talks about things that individuals can help make happen, what organizations and groups need to make happen, things that you can talk to your city council about, things you can talk to your county commission about, things you can, work at the state level with your state legislators, and things you can demand of your congressmen and senators. It is a really, really excellent list, and if you want to see the list, and to sign on to the statement, you can individually put your name on this statement, saying, I endorse these reforms. I stand for change. I'm not going to sit back and just allow this to happen under my watch, so that I'm cradling or watching somebody I know cradling the body of a dead child or a dead man or woman because of this bad policing. You can sign the statement by going to www.lawyerscommittee.org. That's www.lawyerscommittee.org. And the statement is there. You'll see a picture of Michael Brown. You can click on it, and it will take you to the unified statement for police reform. It is absolutely critical. We have, after we created the statement in early August, in mid-August, we proceeded immediately to start lobbying with the federal administration. We started, talking with groups all around the country, and we connected very strongly with the groups in Ferguson. And so we have, had meetings with a lot of those leaders, and meetings with the leaders of some of these powerful coalitions like hashtag, Black Lives Matter, hashtag hands up, don't shoot. We've been, talking with all of them all over the country. So it's very, very important that we all are supportive of this movement. If you have not marched, I understand that not everybody can march, but you do need to raise your voice. And you can go to your city council. And let me tell you this, if you've been pulled over by police, or if you watch the police in your area and they don't have body cams, that's a problem, folks. And I know people will say, well, it didn't stop, the guy who, Pantaleo, who killed, Eric Gardner from being indicted. But let me tell you, those body cameras are important. But what was missing, and what is missing in New York, was an accountability system.
Right.
Because you got to have the protocols and the measures that say, if you violate it, this is a violation. If you violate it, you will be punished. So what we've seen in Ferguson, even recently, what we saw in Missouri, in Berkeley, with the killing of Antonio Martin, is the officer saying, well, I had a bad body camera, but I didn't have it on. I had a dash cam, but I didn't turn it on. There should be punishment for that.
Absolutely. Including punishments of bad practices, like in the case of the chokehold death of Eric Garner.
Absolutely.
And there was no accountability, as you mentioned. in your list of reforms and recommendations on the unified statement, body-worn cameras, of course, was one of the demands. And so we know that President Obama has addressed that in part, but we know there's more that can be done. And so if you'd like to speak to that, I want to hear more about what you have to say about that and the issuance of the racial guidance, the federal guidance on racial profiling, which was another reform that the group requested.
Yes, and I've been, happy to see some response to our requests. We have been, happy to see that the, President Obama and Attorney General Holder have heard us loud and clear. I think the coalition has had about 5 or 6 or 7 calls with the Attorney General and are with the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights and with the Chief of Staff for Attorney General Holder. We've also had about, I would say about 5 or 6 or 7 meetings with the White House. We've, done everything we can to really advocate hard and push, and I've been glad to see the President, announced that he is seeking this legislation, which Congress has ignored to date, for, money, $263 million to provide for 50,000 body cameras. Let me be very clear. That 50,000 body cameras, that's not even 20% of what we need. We know that there's about, 700,000 officers out there, so 50,000 body cameras won't quite do it. So we need, many, many more. But remember, everybody, the money for body cameras, the provision of body cameras, doesn't have to come from the federal government. You can demand that your own police force have them and that they pay for them, because they would rather go out and buy fancy cars. They'd rather go out and buy all this riot gear. One thing people don't know is, when you saw that riot gear in Ferguson, and a lot of people said, oh, well, they got that from the Department of Defense. They got that from the United States government. It turns out that only 30% of what you saw came from the federal government. They bought that other 70%. They used the money that they had been accumulating for years by over-fining African Americans and by, putting people in debtor's prison. If they didn't pay all these fines, they were arresting African Americans at an excessive rate. Think about this, folks. There's only 20,000 people in the entire city of Ferguson, but every year they were arresting about 1,200 African Americans and fining them for every kind of offense. Your dog wasn't on a leash. Your house grass was too high. All these nutty things, and threatening people with jail, and creating a debtor's prison where they would put you in jail and mistreat you in the jail, abuse you, so that it was a way of controlling the African American population. And we know that as a result of that their budget, 20% or more of the city's budget came from these fines, because they would build it into their budget every year that they were going to get at least 25% of their money from these fines. So this is what we're looking at, and what we saw in Ferguson was that they took that money from these fines and went out and bought all these, all this sophisticated riot gear that you saw, on display, and you said, what in the world are we looking at? Well, that's where it came from. So it is important that we hold these cities, police departments accountable, because they can afford the body cams. They say they can't, but they'd rather buy nonsense than do what they need to do. We also are very concerned about police training. And before we even get to police training, one of the problems we want to see is better police screening of who you hire.
Right.
The recruitment of police needs to be a lot better done. We know there are people who get on police forces because they want to be bullies. We know there are people who get on police forces because they are racist and they hate blacks and they want to They want to brutalize and dominate African Americans. We know that police training is so poor that if you didn't see it this week, go back and catch it, people. Go to your Google and Google New York black officers fear being shot by their colleagues.
Yes,
and
when they're off duty in plain clothes.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And how often they are, in fact, shot by their colleagues. And so it's important for people to really understand that the problem that we're talking about is not something that we're fabricating, that we're making up, that this is a real, vital problem that is dangerous to black lives. Don't wait to be part of the solution. Don't wait to be part of the solution when somebody you know has been shot or hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It is time to step up to the plate to demand change because it will affect our entire future. I also want to point out that we also talk about other kinds of policy changes. One of the worst reasons why Michael Brown was stopped, one of the worst reasons why Eric Gardner was taken, quote, down, was because of what's called the broken windows policy. And the broken windows policy is a terrible policing policy that was initiated in the 1980s, which says to police that the way you stop crime is by taking out minor offenders before they become major offenders. So if somebody is walking in the middle of the street, you stop them and you threaten them, or you arrest them if you can. It says that if somebody's selling loose cigarettes, like Eric Gardner was, that you stop him and you arrest him if you can, that any minor offense can lead to somebody becoming a major criminal in the future. And that's a nutty concept. There's been no proof whatsoever that it's a correct concept, but it is what most police departments use, and it's what policies of the Department of Justice had encouraged for years. So it is time for us to abandon broken windows. So that's a question you must ask your city council, your county commissioner, and you must say to your state legislators, we want broken windows eliminated as a policing policy for my state, for my county, for my city.
Thank you, Barbara. And on the federal level, we want people to advocate for passage of the End Racial Profiling Act, correct?
Oh, yes. A lot of people have heard a lot of stuff recently, a lot of information about Attorney General Holder announcing the new anti-racial profiling guidance. And frankly, the Lawyers Committee and many other civil rights groups have been fighting for this guidance for 6 years. We have been begging. We have been fighting. We have been advocating. We have been writing. We have been testifying. We have done everything to try to convince the Department of Justice to issue a new racial profiling guidance, as the last one had been issued under the Bush administration in 2003, and it was weak, and horrible, and did not do what it needed to do to stop police departments from engaging in racial profiling, which is basically, racial profiling is a nice word for racial discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. It's just for police who are being discriminatory in the way that they police. And so we have been advocating for one. We appreciate the new guidance. It is, quote, a step forward. But listen, when you need to run a block to get to justice and you've only gone 10 feet, not enough, folks. We need to actually have a much more effective guidance. So the Racial Profiling Act, the End Racial Profiling Act, is a lot more comprehensive. It has requirements for reporting. It has requirements for, when people can get grants and can't if they don't comply. These are the kinds of measures that are needed. I, give good, props and respect to Congressman Conyers for consistently putting forth what we call IRPA, the End Racial Profiling Act. Right. And everybody should be fighting for it. And guess what? The only reason why I was able to give you the statistics that I did about the city of Ferguson and its population and its number of arrests for African Americans is because Missouri 2 years ago adopted its own version of the Racial Profiling Act. Without it, we wouldn't even know those statistics. And in most states, we don't because they don't have anything like it. So we need the federal legislation, and in the interim, push for it at your local and statewide level.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to touch upon two other issues real quickly. One, we know that in Ferguson, that at the time of Michael Brown's death, there were a very limited number of black registered voters. And if I'm correct, I believe in most jurisdictions, if not nationwide, you can't serve on a jury if you're not a registered voter. So that's something else we need people to do. And I know you want to stress that point. So if you could just speak to the importance and criticality of everyone of voting age registering and being an active voter and having their voices heard in that way.
Listen, we live in a constitutional democracy, meaning that our democracy is based upon a constitution that sets forth people's rights. And if we do not exercise the power to vote as our fundamental right, then we are abdicating our responsibility as citizens. African Americans, I'm sorry, folks, if you haven't seen the movie Selma, you go see it. It's playing in the D.C. area now. You go see Selma because it will remind you of the sacrifice and the fight that it took to get the right to vote. Remember that the right to vote is fundamental. It's the only time in this country when you have an election, when all of us are equal, because my vote is just as good as a Rockefeller vote. My vote is the same as anybody else's. But if you sit back and you don't exercise it, then you're allowing the government to become the way they are in this country. You're allowing people to, deny us the ability to address the injustice that we've been talking about for this last hour. You have to make sure that you are registered to vote. You got to make sure that everybody you know is registered to vote, and you got to make sure that they do vote. And in Ferguson, you have what's called a voter suppression tactic, because what they do is they hold their elections not doing any other major federal or state election. They hold it on an unusual time in February or somewhere during that time when people aren't looking for an election. And most and they don't do a lot of publicizing. They don't tell people when the election is happening, and they spread the news pretty well in the white communities. And blacks have, traditionally not gone out of their way to make sure that they're not only registered, but that they're voting. So it is our joint responsibility to fight voter suppression tactics, but also to be vigilant ourselves. No excuse for Ferguson. We got to change that situation. It's the only way it will change. I'm glad to see a new generation of activists coming up saying, not on our watch. It stops now. We will not put up with this. I can't breathe, meaning that until there is justice, I can't, be normal. I love this new generation, but we got to do the work, folks, because we're going to have to sit on juries. We're going to have to make sure we're registered. We're going to have to vote. There's no such thing as, quote, being inconvenienced. It's all about our living up to our obligations.
Absolutely. And Barbara, where can people go if they want to, understand their rights better, if they feel they've been wrongly handled by the police or someone in their family, or to report instances of police brutality or misconduct in their jurisdictions?
Well, I got good news for people. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, which is one of the signatories to our statement, and it's a good partner with the Lawyers Committee in this reform work, is starting a major, major national drive. And they are concentrating on this issue. And I encourage people to absolutely contact your local ACLU because they're staffing up to do more work in this area and to help people who are victimized. I also encourage people to bring issues, broad policy issues. When you find out that your police department is, targeting African American communities more than other communities, when you find out that they're doing other things that are illegal, I encourage you to bring those to our attention, also to the Lawyers Committee's attention, because we want to do the best we can. This coalition, we understand that this is not about a moment, it's about a movement. We understand that we got to be in this fight, not just for, while the cameras are on it, that we got to be in this fight until we get real change, until we win it. So I just want to encourage people to, join with us, sign the unified statement, become local advocates. I've been so proud of people who have been telling me that they're attending their city council meetings and demanding a civilian review board, by the way. That's something you should make sure you have, and not just a, quote, civilian review board, but one with power to subpoena people, to investigate, and to discipline. If you don't have that authority in a civilian review board, then you don't really have one. But if you have none at all, it's even worse. So it's very, very important for people to, be making and advocating for those reforms. So, yes, join us. Be part of this movement. Fight for justice. Don't sit back and allow the tragedy that is called American policing to continue unabated.
Absolutely. And also in dealing with knowing your rights and reporting your rights is a special conversation that I know you have addressed before, is the conversation that minority parents have to have with their black boys, girls, and young men and women. And so as a mother, what is your best advice to those parents that have to have the conversation?
You got to have it. You have to have the conversation. And you got to tell your young child, and you got to remind even your grown-ups that, policing can be very unfair, and that they are going to, target you because of your race a lot of times, and that you have to put up sometimes with a lot of grief. They can be so disrespectful and so harassing, and they do that to get trying to get a rise from you so that they can imprison you and they can arrest you, that they have an excuse for it. And you got to tell them that I want you to come home. But at the same time, let me be very clear about this. At the same time, all the responsibility isn't on our children. When they come back and they tell us they were stopped and what happened to them, we aren't doing our job by going and holding those police departments accountable. So it's a two-way street. We do our job by not giving them the reason to make us a target, but we also hold them accountable when they violate the law.
Great. Thanks, Barbara. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
1450 WOL, where information is power.
Psst. Yeah, it's me, your heart. Listen to me. We've got to talk. High blood pressure is serious, and yours? Whoa. What happened to us? We used to be so much more active. But lately you've been ignoring me. I know you think I'm just gonna keep ticking away forever, but you're wrong. You can do so much more to control your high blood pressure. Doing the minimum isn't doing enough. I'm under a lot of pressure and can quit whenever I want. Bet you didn't know that. But I like my job. Just treat me better. Check on me. Give me something green to nibble on every once in a while. And maybe we can do some exercise on occasion. Let's get to it. After all, we're in this together.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Hey, there's my son. You've been in your room all morning.
Hey, Dad.
Matt, what's wrong with your voice?
There is nothing wrong with my voice.
Oh, well, it's just sort of.
I have been playing my video games and electronic games for so many hours.
Uh-huh. Well, it sounds like it might be time for you to take a break, or...
Hello, Dad.
Susan?
I have been watching TV and text messaging all morning. Yay, electronics. Yay, yay, yay.
Guys, I think it's about time to get in the car and take a little trip. Maybe see some trees, some green things.
What are these green things you speak of?
This weekend, unplug. Take your family to the forest. There's nothing in the world like experiencing nature firsthand. Trees, paths, bluebirds, streams. Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. To find the forest nearest you, go to discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Confessions of a Potentially Perfect Parent, brought to you by AdoptUsKids.org.
Okay, here goes. I know more about cooking dinner for a party of 12 than I do about packing a lunch for a 12-year-old. I know kids like things like PB&J, pigs in a blanket. Oh, and fish sticks. They do love fish sticks. Fillets I get, but sticks? What part of the fish does the stick come from? I know I can read a cookbook that'll tell me how to make a red wine reduction, but where are the cookbooks that can teach me how to cut the crusts off bologna sandwiches? Oh, maybe we can compromise on mac and cheese. Can you make that with brie? Everybody likes brie, right?
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to push your food around their plate. Call 1-888-200-4005 or visit AdoptUsKids.org for more information. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt Us Kids, and the Ad Council.
As I went through school, one giant question loomed over me. What did I want to be? But in order to know what I wanted to be, I had to first decide what I wanted to make. I wanted to make more. So I became a teacher. Now I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration a tool, not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy, and giving up impossible. I make an old subject feel like a fresh thought, and unconventional methods common. I make material things less important, and little things like patience and kindness count. I make weekdays more exciting than weekends, and classrooms feel like anything but. I make things different, which is all I ever hoped for. I'm a teacher. I make more.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
1450 WOL, where information is power.
Welcome back to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. This is Stacey Royster, your guest host for today. And we're speaking with attorney Barbara Arnwine, President and Executive Director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, about police brutality and misconduct, this nationwide epidemic that is just sweeping nearly every neighborhood, especially urban neighborhoods, and not just in urban neighborhoods, everywhere. This is an issue that we have to address, and thank you, Barbara, for all of your insights today. I wanted to ask you just quickly, I know this is a huge issue to tackle, but grand juries. A lot of people are dismayed by the non-indictment decisions in a lot of these high-profile cases recently. And if you could just help us to understand a little bit about the role of special prosecutors and grand juries and what we can do differently to affect change.
Absolutely. Every state should have a special prosecutor law, which says that when there is a police-involved shooting, that the, especially of an unarmed citizen, that there should be an automatic appointment of a special prosecutor. Prosecutors and the police are just too close. They're totally interdependent on each other, and there's no way that a prosecutor wants the police force to see him or her as being aggressive towards them. So they are not going to aggressively pursue a prosecution. It is just almost unheard of. So it's urgent and necessary that if we want to see justice when there is a police-involved shooting, that there is a special prosecutor statute that is adopted by your state. So if you don't have one, please push for it. And at city council levels, you can also make the same request. At county commission levels, you can make the same request. Special prosecutors for police-involved shootings.
Great. And the last thing I wanted to discuss, Barbara, we talked a lot about what people should do. Let's just speak for a moment about what we don't want people to do to address this national issue. I'm getting a signal. I think we need to, is it a break, Daryl, or? Okay. Real quickly, we have about a minute left in the program. If we can just talk about what we shouldn't do in instances of either threatening police officers or killing police officers, and certainly our hearts go out to the families of the 2 officers killed in New York recently. So I give you the floor to just address that and to make any closing statements about what else people should or shouldn't do.
Well, again, see this as your fight. People should not be silent. To me, that's the biggest mistake you can make. And, of course, you shouldn't let your anger turn to rage. That's why action is the only answer. You got to take action and seek, actual policy changes to address these issues. Again, my love to all the new activists, my love to all the new organizations, my love to all the national organizations. Let's keep fighting, folks. We can make change here. This story has yet to be fully told, and it's not finished.
Thank you, Barbara, so much for joining us. Again, you've been listening to Law Talk with Ethel Mitchell. Ms. Barbara Arnwine, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, noted, renowned civil rights attorney, like I said, boss lady, and she is really doing great things throughout the nation in helping to combat racism and matters of inequality. So we thank you, Barbara, and we look forward to having you back really soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. And Attorney Mitchell has a great show planned for you for the first show of 2015.
Washington, D.C. and WPRS HD2 Waldorf, Washington, a Radio 1 station, and worldwide at WOLDCnews.com.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
When I grow up, I want to be a glass countertop in a new home.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's best birthday present.
When I grow up, I want to be a football stadium.
When I grow up, I want to be a warm fleece on a cold day.
When I grow up, I want to be a fancy backsplash.
I want to be a bike that races around the country.
When I grow up, I want to be a bench on a forest trail.
I want to be a rocking chair on a sunny porch.
I want to be a skyscraper.
I want to be a
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.